idea.
An idea for the show.
I still don't know what the idea is.
It's about nothing.
Right.
Everybody's doing something. We'll do nothing.
They say, what's your show about? I say nothing.
There you go.
I think you may have something here.
Cross Coast Bias presents the League About Nothing podcast.
Welcome into the League About Nothing off-season trade review show. For those unfamiliar, the League About Nothing is a 12-team Start 12 best ball league with Superflex and 2 tight end starting positions, tiered PPR scoring with an additional 3/4 of a point for tight ends and an additional 1/4 of a point for wide receivers. All right, first on our list is a series of trades, both involving Big, where Big takes his quarterbacks and does a couple of downgrades while adding some other assets along the way. First was the trade with Flea, where Big sends away Daniel Jones and a 3rd-round pick, and he receives back Jimmy Garoppolo, Sky Moore, and a 2nd-round pick. So going down a bit at quarterback and getting a little bit extra coming back to him. Shortly thereafter, a couple weeks later in fact, he flipped Jimmy Garoppolo in a trade, sending him to Benign Rug and getting back Baker Mayfield, Kevin Harris, and the 411. So we have 2 trades there, basically doing the same thing in both instances, taking a quarterback, getting a lesser quarterback, and adding in some other assets. How do you feel about that style of trade?
Philosophically, it makes sense, right? In this type of league, 1, it's a best ball. 2, it's a very deep league. So you want as many contributing pieces as possible. So what he did was a double tear down, right? He tiered down once to one quarterback and then tiered down from that quarterback to another quarterback. And the problem I have really is the first half of this trade, the Jones to Garoppolo, is a little bit further than I'd be comfortable tearing down. But again, it depends on how you feel about Jones versus Garoppolo. Right now, it feels like Jones off the new extension, some new guys in the lineup, feels like he should hold a little more value in that kind of low end quarterback 1, high end, really high end quarterback 2 kind of range. I mean, there's still a chance that he reverts back to old Danny Dimes from the previous few years. I'm sure the Giants hope not, since they gave him $40 million a year. They're expecting him to continue to ascend. Yeah, this is a little bit further down than I'd be willing to go. The pieces he got back, yes, he got another quarterback, which is important, another starting quarterback. But the other pieces, I'm not sure they make it up for me. Going from a 3rd to a 2nd is a nice upgrade. You know, he got his own 2nd pick back, which we know Big likes 2nd-round picks. Sky Moore is another gamble. He could come around in the 2nd year, or he could do nothing again, and then this is just a burned roster spot.
I find it fascinating that you said the first half of this trade was the part that bothered you, because to me, I don't have a big issue with tearing from Jones down to Garoppolo, because you're getting back 2 significantly better pieces than the piece you sent out. Draft difference between a 2nd-round pick and a 3rd-round pick is fairly high in my opinion. And Sky Moore, not my guy. I know you were a big fan coming out, but you know, a lot of people still believe, a lot of people want a piece of that offense. The part that bothers me is going from Garoppolo to Mayfield. Garoppolo is often injured, but when he's out there, he puts up decent numbers. Not great, but decent. And Mayfield is, right now we're on 4 teams in a calendar year, basically. He's, went from Cleveland to Carolina, from Carolina out to Los Angeles, and now from Los Angeles to Tampa. Now, that much movement at quarterback and that many stops along the way, you got to imagine that if he can't make it work as a starter here, then he's probably not going to get another chance at it anytime soon. And that right there would scare me more than going down to a guy like Jimmy, who's sure moved teams this year, but hasn't done it quite at the same rate that Baker has, and has produced better than Baker has, frankly.
For me, Garoppolo and Baker are in the same tier. I mean, they're both starting quarterbacks. That's about the best that I can say for them. I'm not really sure that either of them will finish the year as starting quarterbacks. In that other deal, he got some very minor pieces back.
Yeah, Harrison, the 411 were helpful to him in making another trade, but as
actual usable assets, not so much.
I say this as the current manager of Kevin Harris as well.
Yeah, he used those pieces in a trade with you.
Yeah, if anyone is interested,
no
he is available.
Yeah, I think he will soon be available in NFL free agency as well.
Oh, come on. Damn it, Zeke.
But yeah, I mean, really, that second half of the trade, I have no problems with that. Those two guys are very close for me in value. They're both kind of on their last stop if they don't produce this year. Even if they do produce this year, they still may be on different teams next year.
Yeah, it's fair.
So,
well, that's an interesting perspective. I didn't expect us to both like different halves of this trade, essentially, or these two trades. After that, we can move on to another trade where it was a tier up and a tier down. Another one involving Big, and this time involving you as well. You tearing up from DK Metcalf to CeeDee Lamb. You sent DK Metcalf and Devon A-Chain, got back CeeDee Lamb.
well, this one involves me, obviously, on the receiving Lamb side. So it's hard for me to be unbiased. I obviously prefer the Lamb side. But again, Big's got a strategy here. He's tearing down, collecting assets. It makes sense from his side, right? He's getting a guy in DK who's not too far behind Lamb, and he's hoping A-Chain is going to be another big contributing piece.
So tearing up to Lamb is not the way you generally operate, or not to Lamb in specific, but tearing up to the better players, not the way we've seen you do a lot of your trades. But I've said it before, I really like the idea of getting the guys like Lamb, who I consider the very, very top end, because once you get to the playoffs, once you get to the finals, once you get deep into the rounds where you're playing against other really good rosters, you need the difference makers. Having other guys and having more guys during the regular season is going to produce better results, but in the playoffs, you still need that ceiling.
And I think it's a terrible strategy, and I'm ashamed of this trade. This definitely
That sounds right.
Definitely runs counter to what I normally try to do. Normally I'm on Big side where I want as many assets as possible, but I have been doing that for the last couple of years, just accumulating assets. And so at some point I need to kind of consolidate a little bit and try to get some of the elite assets, like you're saying, the big time difference makers. The problem with doing this is you give yourself a very narrow range of winning conditions, right? When you're putting all your eggs in one basket, I need Lamb to produce like a high-end wide receiver one, like he did last year, or this trade is going to hurt me. If DK is even a low-end wide receiver one and A-Chain does anything, I would have been better off having the two pieces versus Lamb and whoever is going to fill that extra spot on my bench, like Kenyon Drake. That's
Kevin
not going to be good for me.
Kevin Harris, anyone?
Getting my fab ready for when you drop him.
Going from one wide receiver trade to another, we had a trade between Melcrisp and Georgia Mike, where Melcrisp traded Jameson Williams, Foster Moreau, and the 211 to Georgia Mike and got back Cooper Kupp and the 312. This is another example of tearing up and tearing down, another example of someone trading away one star asset for some extra picks and some extra incentive on their end. This trade did take place on May 18th, which was about a month after the Williams suspension was announced. So we were aware of that at the time. How do you feel about this one?
As someone that has to worry about Mel as a competitor, I do not love it. I'm not a big JMO fan. I mean, I liked him, sure, as a prospect. And when he got hurt, still managed to get drafted pretty high. There's still some good feelings there. I wasn't expecting a lot from him last year, but he really did nothing. And one of the things that I've learned over the years is these guys that kind of faceplant as rookies and don't do anything, even if it's injury caused, they're generally not great bets to bounce back and ever have any kind of success. And then to immediately be suspended to start this season. The one thing about this deal is this is a strict contender rebuild trade. Georgia Mike took over a horrendous roster, almost completely devoid of any real assets. And he's done pretty well to trade the pieces he had and kind of multiply those. I think if he waited, he could have got more, but it's possible he just really likes JMO. Mm-hmm. For him, it doesn't matter if he doesn't play the first 6 games. He's trying to score as few points as possible so he can have the 101 again next year and probably trade that for more assets. In that sense, it's a good trade for him. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan. It feels a little light for what Cooper Kupp should bring back as someone who's expected to be one of the top wide receivers this year, at least for this year.
Yeah, that was my thought as well. Regardless of how you feel about Jameson Williams, I feel like Cooper Kupp should be able to get a slightly higher return. I like Foster Moreau. He's a good tight end. He's been on one of our other rosters since he was a rookie. The roster that you and I managed together in another league. Going from the third round up to the second round is always helpful, but looking at it asset for asset, it doesn't move me if I'm getting back just JMO for Kupp.
Yeah, that's my thoughts. Right, it feels a little light. Feels like he could have got a little bit more out of it. I mean, to give up Cooper Kupp and not even get a first round pick anywhere in there, even if it's a future pick, I guess you could say JMO may be valued at a first round level, but I mean that could be falling quickly.
Yeah, we've seen other wide receivers that aren't as good as Cooper Kupp go for a single first round pick as well. So if you're valuing JMO at a single first round pick and Kupp is better than the other guys we've seen, did Hollywood Brown. I don't know about you, but I'd take Kupp over Hollywood.
Yeah, definitely this year. If I'm a contender, there's not a better buy than Cooper Kupp.
Not to disparage what Georgia Mike got back and everything. I mean, if he's happy with it, it's his roster and everything. And like you said, he was fairly devoid of assets to make moves with. So that puts him in a position where a lot of the league knows that he's trying to sell. So he might have not had the market that he was hoping for, might not have been able to get the responses he was hoping for.
Yeah, it definitely hurts your leverage when everyone knows you're selling. It makes it more difficult to sell at any kind of reasonable price. That definitely factors in here as well. In a vacuum, it doesn't look great. If you're looking at team context and you're looking at how the league market is, it's possible that this was the best return you can get. I'm not sure because I didn't get any trade offers. Georgia Mike.
In principle, though, it's absolutely the right style of trade to make. It's trade away the aging, depreciating asset, get back younger, extra assets. So it's the right thing now. We can quibble about values, but at the end of the day, everybody's got their own roster to manage.
Yeah, I mostly just don't like Mel receiving any kind of good players on his team. I think that's my biggest problem.
I think we can all get behind that sentiment right there. All right, let's stick with Georgia Mike because that wasn't the only move he made this offseason. He also had a trade where he sent Kenny Pickett and Alexander Madison to Mr. Good News and got back Zach Wilson. Mr. Good News is 2024 first and 2024 third round picks. In this one, it's another similar situation where we're seeing a tier down at quarterback. I think we could say that's a tier down right there, even before the Rodgers signing took place to officially bump Zach Wilson down. How do you feel about Kenny Pickett for Wilson, a first and a third?
I don't consider this a tear down. This was really him trying to get Pickett off his team, taking the first and the Zach Wilson part. And he's taking a chance. He can hold Wilson on his bench. He doesn't really care if he gets zeros this year. He probably prefers it for his draft position. He's more incentivized to take risks on guys like this that could bounce back and come back into value at some point. He's just hoping that Wilson gets another shot, maybe in a year or two when Rodgers hangs it up. But I think the biggest part was getting back those 24 picks. He needs to add as much value to his team as possible. Kenny Pickett is what Kenny Pickett's worth. He may be worth a first roughly in the open market, but that doesn't mean everyone will pay a first for him. Now, if he has the actual liquid first, he can use that however he wants because everyone will take a first round pick from you if you're trading him away. Trust me, I've traded a few.
Yeah, it's this move I like much more. Like you said, getting Pickett off the roster. Pickett, even at top end projections, doesn't ever really project to be one of those top 10, top 12 quarterbacks. You're not giving up, an asset that's likely to appreciate to the point where you would feel that much regret over losing it. And like you said, he drops down his own points, ensures that number one overall pick, most likely, adds the extra 24 first round pick as opposed to the 23 first round pick, which Mr. Good News had already traded away previous to this. But in this instance, it gives him another year without having any active points on the roster, pushes some value into the future as well. And the same thing with Madison. It's an asset that's useful this year. We don't really know if Madison's going to be great as the lead guy. So trading him now before the season starts, I actually think was probably a smart decision. Like you said, chance on Wilson. Who knows how he develops or if he develops ever.
And on the good news side, it's nice to be able to pick up a starting quarterback and another useful running back while only really giving up a first. I mean, Wilson in the third. Wilson's a dead asset for him. He doesn't really want zeros on his bench as a competing team. And the third is fine. I mean, you can buy You can buy, sometimes you can buy a fill-in running back for a third, but I'd rather have Madison at that price. And I'd certainly rather have a quarterback when his depth chart is a little shaky behind Herbert. So having that locked-in quarterback too probably makes him feel a lot better versus what he hopes is going to be a late first-round pick next year anyway.
Yeah, smart buy for a contender. Seems to be a theme here, the contenders and the sellers. Speaking of teams needing to trade for quarterbacks, we had another one that you were involved in. A trade with Judd just recently, where you traded away Jordan Love, Kate Otten, and a 2024 second, and got back Dallas Goedert and a first-round pick. So Judd shoring up his QB room with the unknown of Jordan Love, and you shoring up your tight end room with Dallas Goedert. How do you feel about it after the fact?
I mean, I know this trade just happened recently, but really it's been in the works for months. Judd only has Burrow as a actual starting quarterback on his roster, and the rest of his roster is very competitive. So if you want to compete in a super flex, you have to have more than one quarterback. Ideally, you would have 3 or even 4 in a best ball, but for sure you would need more than one. So I reached out to him because I had 4 quarterbacks, and he likes Love, and so do I. I mean, I took him in the startup. I've held him all this time on my bench, accumulating zeros for me. It wasn't easy to part with him, but to take the liquidity of the 24 first, which I can possibly turn into something else, and then the upgrade at tight end, we all know how important tight ends are in this league. It was an easy decision for me, and I hope it works out for both of us.
This to me is a good decision on both ends. You had 4 quarterbacks on your roster, so the decision to send one out isn't as strenuous as it could be. And for Judd, getting that second starter is essential. He was a playoff team last year, and I'm sure he has ambitions to be a playoff team again this year. Tearing down from Goddard to Otten, I'm fine with that. And getting back a second round pick as well. So he's got the double second round pick in 2024, and I think he's picked up a third one since then. So I mean, he's still got a good amount of draft capital there. This seems like a smart decision on both sides to me.
Yep, even without his first, he's got the ammo now if he needs to pick up pieces and fill in spots as the season progresses, right? Which is what you want as a contender. It's nice to have great starters, but you also need some extra pieces in case things go wrong, because this is the NFL and they will. Players get hurt. You're going to need to pick up guys that can fill in and start here throughout the season. So getting that second round pick back was actually a big deal. And getting Otten back too. I mean, that gives you another useful tight end in a league where it's difficult to find tight ends. So I think it was a good get. I didn't want to give those up, but I also wanted to get the deal done.
This is way too flowery. We're cutting all this.
Of course, I like my own trades. Give me a different trade.
All right, there we go. We could find one that you weren't involved in. It might take a few minutes, but we could find one.
There's not that many of them.
No, unfortunately for the rest of us, every time a trade pops up in the league, I'm like, oh, who made a trade? And then I look at you and I'm like, yeah, I guess I should have known that.
I'm disappointed with every trade that does not involve me. Anytime a trade happens without me being involved, I'm not happy.
All right, so we had one here with a couple of tight ends, and we want one without you involved. We got one to highlight that's a little bit lower stakes than the rest of these, but still interesting. We had Flinch 50 and Flea made a deal where Flinch acquired Gerald Everett for the 308 and the 412. Not quite the blockbuster that CeeDee Lamb was, but adding a tight end, useful. Adding some late picks, also useful. What do you think?
So this was early in the season, I think March 29th. This was during Flea's attempt to strip her entire roster of players and turn them all into draft picks, which she was mostly successful with. She had a lot of picks. And then she decided to trade for the 101 and flip the switch back the other direction. So at this point, it feels a little light for Everett. I'm not sure I like this one in a vacuum, but the thing that I do like is she used these extra picks to add to some of the other picks she picked up and acquire Darren Waller. So it's kind of like a 4D chess move where she's she may not have been thinking multiple moves ahead at this point, but it worked out really well for her in the end. And I think Flinch got a good deal picking up a tight end, adding to his tight end room before the draft, and when he drafted 16 other tight ends.
I just went to look. I just went to look at the draft board here. The 308 ended up being Spears, and it was actually a pick that was made by Flinch. So he must have gotten that trade, must have gotten that pick back in subsequent trades. And the 412 ended up with Mel, and he picked Deuce Vaughn with that one.
So none of these picks were used.
No, none of these picks stayed. None of these picks.
Well-
I mean, once
Yeah, that
Fleet
makes sense.
once she decided she was getting the 101 and the 102, she started making other moves, and
Yeah, she started.
I could track them, but it would take a few minutes here.
Oh, that's a whole nother show to break down that strategy of acquiring all the picks and then immediately trading all the picks for players.
That just sounds like something you would do. It was honestly, it was an impressive bit of trading, both to acquire all of them and then to just send all of them out in such a short span of time.
Yeah, to be able to change gears like that on the drop of a hat was fun to see. Made for some good action in the league. Lots of a trade flurry.
I don't really have any opinion on this Everett for these late picks. It's fine.
I'd rather have Everett in this format.
Yeah.
Because tight ends are so difficult to get. I don't think Everett is some amazing tight end one,
No, he's not.
but he's definitely going to be a useful starter in this league. So to get him for what was basically a mid third and a late fourth is good value.
We have a trade between Mel Crisp and you to discuss. Tony Pollard, Van Jefferson, Justin Fields, a third-round pick in 2024, and a third-round pick in 2023, heading towards Mel. And coming back to you, Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Waddle, and Deonta Foreman. Now, this is probably the most blockbuster of the trades that we're discussing here. You got a top asset in Justin Fields, a stud wide receiver in Jalen Waddle, top end running back in Tony Pollard. We got all the pieces here. This is a trade where it's risk on both sides. It's just what kind of risk do we have? On Mel's side, getting Justin Fields, the risk is that Fields doesn't pan out, doesn't develop in the next year or two, and ends up fizzling out. On your side, you get Tua as your centerpiece. And the risk there, as everyone knows, is that he gets more concussions or any kind of injuries, I suppose, and ends up out of the league and retired and in a nursing home in the next 2 years. So what made you decide to pursue a trade where you were sending out a guy who was one of the most electric quarterbacks on the field last year?
You nailed it. I mean, it's definitely a matter of risk tolerance. Which risk are you willing to take? Fields essentially carried my team to the playoffs last year with the second half run he had, pun intended. He was about as electric as you could be from a fantasy perspective. It didn't really translate to the Bears getting any more wins. So that's kind of his risk, right? He's amazing for fantasy when he runs like that. The downside is if he can't figure out how to lead them to more victories and they end up with another top pick, it's going to be hard for them to pass on an elite quarterback prospect a second time. Now on the Tua side, obviously he's quite literally one hit away from retirement. He contemplated retirement in the offseason. There's heavy risk on both sides, and there's also heavy upside. I mean, Fields could get into that Hurts tier with a big season. Right, you can definitely see that jump happening. And Tua was playing like a top 8 to 10 quarterback midway through the year last year before he started to go down. The other part of this trade is, the Waddle Pollard. Obviously, I prefer to. You look at my roster, right? I prefer to have my team value invested in wide receiver versus running back.
Yeah, me too.
But again, Mel did well to get not just Pollard, but a pair of third-round picks. One he used on Tank Bigsby. So you talk about even more running back value there.
And I mean, he got back another wide receiver piece as well. Jefferson isn't in the same league as Waddle, but he's still a useful piece for our league.
Yeah, useful for him. He turned him into another third-round pick in a separate trade.
Yeah, and Foreman was a piece that you took and later flipped in another trade that netted you the Charbonnet pick, which got you a running back that you probably value a little bit more highly. And at the time, you still had Herbert on the roster, so you were hedging your bets in that manner as well. Did you get that pick with the did you get Foreman with the intention to flip him?
No, I mean, I really liked the thought of having the tandem backfield, and then they drafted Roshan, and I decided I probably don't want 2/3 of this backfield.
2/3 of the committee.
when it looked like it was going to be two of them, then it made sense. But once they added another piece, I kind of wanted to diversify a little bit.
Yeah, and using him as a piece to go out and get Charbonnet, who we heard your love for in the previous episode, seems like a good use.
Which side do you actually prefer?
This is tough because I mean,
you won't hurt my feelings if you say not my.
No, here's the thing. I actually think the best piece in the trade is probably Waddle.
Really?
I don't think Fields is the best piece in this trade. If you gave me the choice between adding Fields or Waddle to my roster, I'd probably add Fields because I could turn Fields into more than Waddle.
Says the Mahomes owner who doesn't need quarterback, but yes. In startup drafts, Fields is the first player taken out of this group.
He's absolutely the player with the most value. I honestly don't know which side of this I prefer. I think it's a fairly even trade. I would probably lean towards the side getting more assets, but I don't know if just because I like having assets. I mean, the third round picks are nice, but we know the hit rate on those. It's nothing. It's 15%.
If you make the pick, now you can also use third round
fair.
Picks to do other things. So they're useful in assets in and of itself.
Yeah,
so
one of them is a 24 pick as well, which pushes it out to the future and gives you longer to utilize it.
Honestly, taking myself out as one of the participants, I think I'd probably prefer the side that Mel got. He's getting the best piece in the deal, Fields, the most valuable piece, and he's getting the most assets in the deal, and he's getting the best liquid assets, picks that he can turn into other things, which he already has, plus Jefferson, who he turned into a pick afterwards anyway.
It's a fair trade, and we both tend to lean towards the adding more assets. The last trade we're going to cover is one that just took place between some guy known as Jarsal and Big, where I traded for JSN and a third round pick and sent out James Cook, Eli Moore, Henderson, a second rounder, and a fourth rounder. I've said it before, no one wants to hear me justify my own trade, so let me throw to you first. What do you think?
No, I want to hear your side.
All right, fair enough. I love JSN. I'm high on the guy as a prospect. He was my favorite receiver coming into the draft. I've got him in one other league where I was thrilled to get him with somehow the 7th pick overall. I was devastated when we traded away our 104 in the league that you and I co-manage when we traded for Justin Jefferson there, and we couldn't draft JSN anymore. Although I guess Jefferson's a good consolation prize. This is not the normal way that I trade. I gave up a boatload of assets for one guy. I haven't done that before in this league. You want the assets. You want the guys on your roster. You want as many shots to get those points in your lineup as possible. But I think JSN's a special talent. I think he's going to be a top 12 guy in the league fairly soon. So I saw an opportunity to get him and I jumped on it. We went back and forth quite a bit on those negotiations before it actually got settled, and Big Drive's a hard bargain, but he has a tough time saying no to those second round picks, that money round.
Yeah, I know about the negotiations. I heard about them from both sides secondhand. So. Again, when you're trading for the one piece and you're giving up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces, going away, you give yourself a very narrow range of outcomes to have a successful trade. JSN pretty much has to hit, and he has to contribute this year because you're trying to be a contending team. You want to win. You're giving up a lot of pieces that could potentially contribute to your lineup. But again, you're getting the best player in the deal. You're always trying to tell me to tear up. You definitely followed your own advice here, getting the most valuable piece of the trade. To be determined if this helps you this year or not.
Obviously want it to work out in year one, but if it takes a couple of years for fruition on this thing, it's not going to be the end of the world to me. JSN's a young guy. Obviously, he's a rookie coming in. He's got to be young.
Tell that to Stetson Bennett. You don't have to be young to be a rookie.
That is an excellent point. I mean, he's no Brandon Whedon, but he's up there.
Brandon Whedon. Oh, no.
What is it? He was 28 when he was drafted, if I recall, right?
29, I think.
29 was he?
A 29-year-old first-round pick. Brown's gonna Brown.
Yeah, that was a tough one. Everyone in the minute, like the second it happened, everyone was just like, yeah, well, that's not going to happen. That's not going to work. Like, there was like 2 people in the country who thought that was going to work. One of them was apparently in the Browns front office.
Yeah,
The other was
is no longer in the NFL for
the other
reason.
one was Brandon Whedon's mother.
I don't know if his mom would have taken him in the first round. Because some good Brandon Whedon talk going on.
Yeah. Well, that wraps up our trade review. Hope everyone enjoyed those. If your trade that you wanted to see reviewed didn't make it, well, do a better job and make better trades, guys. Come on, get on it.
Motivation.
No, we had a lot of choices to make. We do a lot of trading as a league, and we had to limit our selection, so we weren't here for 6 hours at a go. Next time, we're going to do our season preview. We're going to go team by team. We're going to do some roster breakdowns, projected wins, playoff chances, things like that. We'll be getting to that as soon as we can, and hopefully everyone will tune in for that.
I'm just upset. I really wanted to discuss my Marquez Callaway for one fab deal. I'm just sad that it didn't make the cut. Let's wrap this up. I got offers to make.
All right. See everybody next time.
So what are you gonna do?
I like sports. I can do something in sports.
In what capacity?
You know, like the general manager of a baseball team.
Yeah, well, that can be tough to get.
Well, it doesn't even have to be the general manager. Maybe I could be like an announcer, like a color man. You know how I always make those interesting comments during the game?
Yeah, you make good comments.
So what about that?
Well, you know, they tend to give those jobs to ex-ball players and people that are, you know, in broadcasting.
Well, that's really not fair.